the Taliban is being undermined by Afghan Muslims who are informing the Afghan government, and and we're informing the CIA and so on in the past about Taliban activities to undermine them, not just other extremists, but people who want a secular and liberal Afghanistan, but who are also Muslim believers. So it's a really simple-minded mentality to not understand that when you're talking about Islam and Christianity, you're talking about the two biggest religions in the world, number one being Christianity, number two being Islam. And the fact that most adherents to these religions are kind of dealing with some cognitive dissonance. They're not really embracing everything in the scripture. They're not sitting there saying that, they're not going to eat shellfish because it's forbidden in the book of Leviticus, or they're not going to wear mixed cotton wool blend because that's forbidden in the book of Leviticus. They have their own interpretations and they cherry pick, and it's better that they do. It's when they don't that we have the bigger problem. So let's encourage people, no matter what religion they are, to cherry pick. Let's encourage them to throw out the verses that are nonsense and that teach bigotry and condone things like sex slavery and the execution of non-believers such as myself. But I could be here all day sharing Koran and Bible verses that call for the execution of non-believers, atheists, people like me, that call for executing homosexuals. In the Jewish, the Christian, and the Islamic scriptures, there's so many horrible things calling for punishing children for disagreeing with their parents. I mean, these things that are ridiculous. Now, going on from there, it's far past time for people in the so-called West. It's really a kind of a silly term. I'm here in North Africa, which is not considered the West. And directly north of us is the West, which is Europe, right? It's a silly term, but okay, let's put that aside. It's far past time for people in the so-called West to stop assuming that everyone from a Muslim majority country is a Muslim. So when you look at somebody who's from Syria or Iraq, don't assume they're a Muslim because they're from a country that's majority Muslim, any more than you would assume someone from the United States is a Christian. It's ridiculous. There's enormous numbers of people that aren't Muslims in those countries. And if you got to know a lot of the friends and associates I have online, you'd find a huge number of atheists from and in Muslim majority countries, not to mention Muslims who are very liberal, feminist, pluralist, pro-democracy, anti-terrorism, pro-LGBT rights, secular Muslims who support the separation of religion and state. And, of course, people who are not Muslims, people that are Druze, Baha'i, people that are Christians, people that are Jewish, people that are Buddhist. I mean, they all exist in these Muslim countries. People that are Taoists, people that are not sure what they believe. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, all that sort of thing, okay? We're all kind of the same, and we've all been indoctrinated with some nonsense, and we got to kind of work through that. The thing people need to realize is that there are nearly as many schools of thought within Islam as there are within Christianity. Like I said before, Martin Luther King and the KKK both considered themselves to be Christian. The people fighting against the terrorists in Pakistan, some of them are non-believers, and they have to hide that because it's not safe to do so. But the majority of the people in any Muslim country who are fighting against the extremists, the jihadists, the people who want to impose Sharia law on them, the majority of the secularists are actually believers still. I wish that they weren't, but they are, you see? And so it's just like this, we've got, Martin Luther King was a Christian who oppose slavery, even though the Bible condones slavery. So we got plenty of anti-Sharia, pro-secular Muslims all over the world. So people need to understand that. As it is with Christianity, same it is with Islam. And these are the two most practiced religions on earth. Okay? Now, on to just finally, this notion that democracy and capitalism are somehow going to save us from this problem of Islamic extremism. Okay. As for democracy, of course, I'm 100% for democracy, as long as there are human rights and civil rights for minorities and oppressed groups built into the Constitution and law, and a strong separation of religion from the affairs of government. Okay? The mental, social, political, and religious disease that spawns terrorism has a name, and that name is theocracy, religious government, which is the cause of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram and the Taliban and the Abu Sayyaf group. But it's also the cause of all the Christian dominionists in the United States and of the Christian supremacists in Europe massacring and opposing the placement of refugees in Europe. Every Christianity has had its periods where it's had total religious control over government, and these were horrific periods in human history, and still has occasional killer fanatics. If one chooses religion, it's the business of the individual to choose that religion. It cannot be imposed on you. We can't have religious governments in the world. No government, no school, actually not even a parent or the society or the culture or the family should really have the right to force anyone to believe something supernatural, because there's no evidence for the supernatural. It's make-believe. Without secularism and universal human rights protections, without some sort of constitution that says that you have these rights, democracy just ends up being mob rule by the majority, mob rule by the pen rather than the sword, a way for majorities to oppress minorities, quote unquote, peacefully and legally. So yes, I'm 100% for democracy. Democracy is part of the solution to all these problems. But democracy didn't give African Americans equal rights in the United States. We're still fighting for that. But the steps toward that have come about through legislation, through constitutional amendments, through sending the National Guard to enforce integration of the schools. I mean, they didn't come because you let the majority decide whether or not black people deserve rights. They come by imposing it upon the majority that minorities have rights. As for capitalism, I'm all for capitalism. I'm all for private business ownership, as long as it's tempered with some regulation and some sensible amount of socialism. The most stable, dynamic, healthy, and equitable economies on earth are all some form of mixed economy, in which some things are privately owned and some things are publicly owned. The silly notion of capitalism versus socialism should have died with the Cold War. Australia, Sweden, New Zealand, Switzerland, the UK, France, Japan, Holland, Finland, Norway, Canada, even the United States, which is really messed up economically, are all examples. Economically, I mean the gap between rich and poor, the ability to afford your basic necessities in life, like healthcare, which is a basic necessity, like housing, which is a basic necessity. It's really messed up in the U.S. Anyway, all of those countries are examples of various forms of mixed economies. Pure capitalism and pure socialism don't work, don't really exist, and never really could exist. So they're fairy tales. I mean, capitalism means private ownership of business, private ownership of industry. Most societies on earth have that, to some degree or another. Socialism means public ownership. Most societies on earth have some public industry of some kind. So there's always some socialism and some capitalism. The issue isn't whether one is completely evil or the other is completely good. This is ridiculous. So neither business nor government is inherently bad or good, and both have a place in a healthy economy. So I'll just end it there, and thanks for listening.